Hello and welcome to the Midlife Men podcast with me, Philip Briscoe. My guest today is Tik Maynard, a horseman, author and dad who hit midlife and started asking some big questions about life purpose and what really matters. And he's also written a book about it. So welcome, Tik.
Thank you, Philip. Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be on your podcast.
Great. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I know you've written about feeling split in two in your younger years. Can you talk about what that means?
Yeah, I've always been interested in a number of different things, and the first big split that I had to decide was I going to stay in Vancouver in Canada, where I was born, and pursue an education and a career there, or was I going to follow my passion and my interest, which was horses, and go out and learn more about that and travel the world and see if that was something that I could make a living doing. And I really, the beautiful thing about it to me was that I enjoy both. Like, I enjoy school, I enjoy horses, I enjoy being in different cultures, enjoy being in different places. So being split in two has sort of that positive feeling to it. I guess, being split in two, the negative of that is trying to feel like I'm being my authentic self in both areas. There's a lot of times in the horse world when you go out and you're with people that are more accomplished than you, and you're trying to figure out how to navigate that. And there's times where you sort of end up being a version of yourself. Maybe you're trying to impress somebody that's a little tough to figure out. I'd say when I went out and I was in my mid-20s, going back 20 years now, and I wanted to follow this path with horses, my big goal was to become a better rider. And what that looks like for a non-horse person, to describe it to you, Philip, is that it's the person that sits on the horse and they're winning the ribbons and they look pretty and they're getting owners and sponsors. And then partway through that journey, after I'd left home, I realized that there's something kind of deeper in the horse world. And that's not necessarily the person that's a better rider. That's the person that's a better horseman. And that's kind of a different concept. A horseman is somebody that, you think of it as somebody that understands horses. They can read horses well. They understand how horses learn, how horses play, what motivates horses. And I think it's probably the same questions that we ask ourselves later in life. It's sort of like, what does success look like?
And what were your first experiences with horses? How did you get into to riding in the first place?
It's something that I always did. I grew up in a family that we had horses in the backyard. Both my parents rode. My mom rode. My dad rode. There's a lot of kids. Philip, you've got 3 kids. There's a lot of kids that, from the time that they're 5 or 6 years old, they want to be around horses. They want to ride horses. But for me, that wasn't really, I guess, an option, because it was part of our lifestyle, part of our culture. The same way that maybe some kids, as part of their family, they play baseball or they go to church. It's not really something that they had to beg for or plead for. It's just part of the way they grew up. And that's how it was like, with horses for me. The big decision was when I kind of hit my mid-20s and I'd graduated from school, and it was like, what's the next step? And that was kind of a big turning point in my life. And then recently, as part of this book, I'd accomplished a lot of what I wanted to accomplish in the horse world. And then there was kind of the next big step, which is that how can I change this career into something that I enjoy every day? And that's a hard thing to do as well.
And you talk, so your book starting in the middle, you talk a bit about hitting midlife and starting to feel a bit disconnected. Can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah. In the horse world, there's a number of different disciplines. There's competitive sports, like at the Olympics, there's dressage and show jumping and eventing. There's also a number of other sports like endurance or Western sports like reining and cutting. You can train horses for the movies, or you can do liberty training. And we're sort of always, as you pick a path, what success looks like is usually, are you winning? Um, are you making a living? Do you have students? And there comes like a turning point where you start to think, can I make up my own definition of success? Um, and with horses, it's really interesting because Philip, have you ever been to the races with horses, or have you ever been to a horse show?
I have, yes. Yeah, I've been to several.
And some people say that horses like winning, or that, the horses are trying to please, or they like winning. And I don't really think I buy that. I don't really believe that. I think it's humans that like winning. It's humans that like praise, recognition, prize money. I think what horses care about is basically one thing from people, which is, how do we make them feel? Do we make them feel seen and heard? Do we make them feel relaxed? Do we put them in a situation where they understand what's going on, or are we putting them in a situation where they're overfaced or they're anxious? And I wanted to start to learn how to work around horses in a way that felt more mutually beneficial rather than just for winning.
And because you grew up with horses and you've worked with them all your life, I guess you feel horses more than it must feel a second nature to you to kind of that point where you really feel that you understand horses and their behavior and their emotions and how they feel. I mean, I guess the way that somebody who perhaps has watched baseball their whole life may know that game inside out, but I guess tell us about how was that kind of through osmosis that you really started to almost be able to breed horses and understand what they were thinking.
A part of it is being around horses your whole life, but you can be, I think you can be around horses your whole life and still not really understand them. I think you can be around baseball your whole life and you enjoy it, but you don't really have a deeper understanding of it. I think it's the same thing with people. I think you could be around people your whole life and not truly understand how people learn and how people are motivated. I mean, I think you could even be around yourself your whole life and not really understand yourself. I think maybe that's almost the point of your podcast is, we can spend 40 years with ourselves and still not really understand the deeper questions. And it's the same thing with horses. I see a lot of people that say they've had a lot of experience around horses, but you can have more than one kind of experience. You can have an experience that is good, you can have experience that's bad, and you can have an experience on a shallow level, or you can have experience on a deeper level. Another example is dogs. I've had dogs my whole life, but when I get in touch with or I observe very, very talented dog trainers, it's on a whole, they're seeing stuff that's on a whole different level than what I'm seeing stuff on. So I think it also involves a lot of study, a lot of looking deeper. A little bit like what maybe what you're going through, which is the study, the talking, the interest, the curiosity to kind of understand it on another level.
And so, for those people kind of in midlife, and talking about yourself as well, how did you find that being around horses? How did it help you perhaps reconnect with yourself? Is it the presence? Is it perhaps the way that they make people feel?
Yeah. So first of all, not everybody has sort of an innate draw to animals or to horses, but a lot of people do. I think there's something inside probably everybody somewhere that has a respect or an appreciation or an enjoyment about being around animals or being in nature. Something that is grounding, something that where time happens a little slower. When you're on your screen all the time, life seems to me move a little faster, and we're kind of looking for little sound bites or little memes, or you're scrolling through Facebook. But when you're out in the woods, it kind of slows you down and brings you a little bit more into awareness. And if you want to be a good horse trainer, you really have to be present. You can't be distracted. Like, you really got to be involved in every moment. What this book that I was published recently is about, it was about competing at Road to the Horse, which is a competition where we have to train a 3-year-old gelding quarter horse over 3 days, an hour and a half on Friday, an hour and a half on Saturday, and an hour on Sunday. So we essentially have 4 hours to take what you might almost think of as a wild horse. It's not a totally wild horse, but it's virtually a wild horse. You can't just walk up and catch it. It's never been led before. It's never had somebody on its back before. And we have to take that horse and we have to train it. And as part of that process, I did a lot of not just training of horses and studying horse training, but I also did a lot of kind of soul searching about whether this was an ethical thing to do and how did I want my approach to be. And one of the kind of things that I heard along the way was the concept of high involvement, low attachment. And that's the idea. High involvement means we're really involved in the process. We put a lot of time and heart and energy and study into it. But what low attachment means is we're not attached to the outcome. And that's a very easy thing to say, and it's a very hard thing to do. And I've heard variations of that my whole life. I've done a lot of different sports in my life, and it's sort of what we call being process oriented, not goal oriented. And you can say that to yourself all day long, but it's very hard to really believe it. And every time, and the reason it's important is because every time you get out of the process and you start thinking about the goal, it distracts you for a moment. And as soon as you're distracted for a moment, it affects your ability to react to a situation. It affects your timing. With horses, it's something that I think they notice immediately, especially if it's a horse that is still in the process of being tamed or being trained. Just to give you an example, in that 4 hours that I spent with that horse, I think that was the most present I've ever been for that amount of time with anything in my entire life. And I was able to bring it together for that competition. I think in those 4 hours, my thoughts only left that round pen with that horse maybe 3 times. And to give you an idea of how much that affected me, there was one time on the first day where I looked out of the round pen at the crowd watching. There's thousands of people watching. There's live streaming cameras. There's judges. There's $100,000 prize money, and you're trying to sort of block all this out and just be in the moment with this horse. And I looked out of the round pen at what was happening in another round pen. There's 4 competitors. I looked at what one of the other one was doing, and my eye was drawn over there for 2 or 3 seconds. That's it, 2 or 3 seconds. But it took me probably almost a full minute before I was really totally present in the round pen with my horse again. So 2 or 3 seconds outside, and then to really be in the moment again took me a full minute. And I think that's why that concept of high involvement, low attachment is so important for that horse to really feel that I'm right there with them the whole time. The other thing that I heard was when I was studying starting horses, a lot of people throw around things like, you want your horse to trust you, or you want your horse to respect you, or you want your horse to like you, or you want your horse to love you, or people say, my horse loves this, or my horse loves me, or my horse loves food. And it got me thinking a little bit about what are the definitions of these words? Because if I were to ask 10 people what their definition for respect or trust or love is, my guess is you'd probably, to the average person, you'd get 10 fairly different answers if you could come up with a clear answer at all. And I remember asking a lady who's sort of a life coach or a therapist or something like that. She has kind of a very calm Zen Buddhist way of being. And I asked her what her definition of love is. And she said to her, love is simply being totally present. And I just love that. It's not necessarily trying to fix something. It's not necessarily saying somebody can't go through a period of pain or grief or adversity, but it's really just trying to really be present with them. And going through this process of starting horses, which was something that I hadn't really done a lot of up until, my getting ready for this competition in my early 40s. And starting horses is a very different thing than riding a trained horse. Riding a trained horse definitely has its own challenges and things that you have to be good at. But starting a horse right from the scratch, giving a horse their first experience with a human is really a whole other ball game. And being totally present is one of the most important things to bring to the table. And after going through that with this horse, it's something that I really try to bring to other parts of my work and to my family and to my kids and to things like this, honestly, Philip, to trying to be, as present as I can when I'm having a conversation with somebody.
And so this example of the competition, how two-way is that relationship? So, you talk about if you're not present, for 3 seconds, it took you a minute to regain the horse's attention. Is it two-way? Are you in control? Are you forming a kind of relationship in those 4 hours, which is equal, if you like, or are you the one that's kind of informing the outcome?
That's a really good question, and essentially, what you're doing is you're taking an animal or another being, and you're trying to. That's exactly what you do. Is you're trying to create a relationship with them that is based on it's based on communication. Can you understand them, and can they feel seen and heard? And you're trying to have them start to learn to understand you. And it might be similar in some ways to if you're trying to create a relationship with uh, somebody that comes from another culture and speaks another language. And very quickly, you're trying to start to develop a simple language and a simple way to communicate. And you're also trying to understand them as a being and start to think, how are they motivated? What do they want out of this relationship? And I guess the important thing at the beginning is that when the horse does something that I don't want, there's no, I try to take out of my vocabulary the word should. There's no, they should do this or they should do that. Either they're understanding me and they're acting like a partner, or they're not understanding me. And if they're not understanding me and they're not doing it, I have to go back to myself and say, what can I do differently? How can I, if the relationship's not going the way I want it to go, there's no chance, there's no opportunity. It's not helpful at all to say they should be doing this or put any blame on them. Even though I want it to be an equal partnership, 100% of the responsibility is on me to create that.
And so, interesting. You were starting to talk about what you'd learned there and applying it to other parts of your life and other relationships in your life. So as well as that, how did it help your understanding of, the strength required or maybe, masculinity involved in that scenario? How do you take your experience, for example, in this competition or training horses, and what does that teach you about masculinity and strength and even vulnerability?
Well, first of all, there's a lot of vulnerability in doing this competition. That was one of the biggest challenges for me right off the bat. I got the invitation to compete at this. It's an invitation-only competition. You can't just sign up and go do it. And when you're competing with this horse, and you're trying to sort of tame this horse and create this relationship with the horse in front of a crowd of there's close to 10,000 people watching, and there's thousands of people more at home watching the live stream. And any mistakes that you make are broadcast around the world. And not only that, but a number of the people in my life that I really respect, my father being one of them, and one of my mentors in the horse world, David O'Connor, when I asked them if I should do this competition, both of them initially said no. And I think that was mainly for the reason of trying to protect me, from failure, from not being prepared for it, from making a fool of myself, from the chance of something being taken out of context on social media, from basically that concept of that vulnerability. It's a pretty vulnerable position to put yourself in to do this, and it took a lot of soul searching on my part and a lot of talking to to people and getting different points of view and having a long conversation with my wife to decide that this was something that I felt um, that I really wanted to do, and the only reason I would not do it would be fear. And while there were a lot of scary things about doing it, both, from the perspective of other people watching, but also the fear of things that could go wrong when you're doing this with a horse. Starting a horse can also be dangerous. Like every year around the world, there's people that are kicked or bitten or they fall off or they get hurt. So it's a dangerous thing to do as well. It's not something, starting a horse in 4 hours is not just something that a run-of-the-mill horse trainer is going to do. It takes a lot of preparation. Um, And then, once I kind of committed to doing it, the next thing is that this competition is really geared towards the Western crowd. When you talk about masculine, these are like the cowboys. These are the people that wear, the Wrangler jeans and the cowboy boots and the cowboy hats. And I don't know if you know much about the differences in the horse world, but I grew up kind of riding in what you think of as the more the English style and in pony club and in the tight pants and the tall boots and the helmet and droppers and the little saddle. And so, in the 20 plus years this competition has been running, 99% of the people have been cowboys. There's myself and only one other person that have come from an English background, not a Western cowboy background, to do this. And so I had to really think, like, was I going to change my approach entirely and try to become a cowboy and do this? Was I going to start to wear jeans and cowboy boots and a helmet and ride in a cowboy hat and a Western saddle and start to, go to Texas and chewing tobacco and what was I going to have to change about myself in order to do this? And, what I ended up deciding to do was to learn from as many people as I could, whether they were English background, Western background, cowboy, not cowboy. I was going to try to learn from as many of those people as I could up until the month before the competition started. So I was going to put myself in all these learning opportunities. And then 1 month out from the competition, I was going to take all those things and I was going to absorb or incorporate into my style all the things that I liked and all the things that I felt authentic to me. And I was going to let go of everything else. And my goal in that last month was to come in with a style that felt, you know, probably the word that would most resonate wouldn't be masculine. It would be authentic. How could I most authentically be myself? And however that looked to the crowd, however that looked to people watching, I was not going to care about it. I was just going to approach it because I felt like if I could truly be authentic and I could really own that, that was going to be my version of masculine, and that was what I was going to present to the horse and present to the crowd.
And was that your way of was that kind of your shield, if you like? Because it must have been intimidating being in that sort of environment, surrounded by, kind of Western style riders.
Honestly, Philip, I can say it was the most vulnerable, intimidating thing I've ever done in my life. Yeah, it was really tough. And what was interesting was that I've done it 2 years now. And to give the listeners a context, despite all this, being a little bit the underdog the first year, I went into it and I won. And then because I won, I was invited back a second year in 2025 to compete a second time. And going into it the first year, the comments that I got from people were like, don't worry if you can't finish. Don't worry if you don't even ride the horse. Just do the best job you can. Nobody's expecting anything from you, so you can really just go into it and be, in the moment. And if you have to quit early, that's fine, you know? And after I won the first year, the comments I got the second year were, you know, are you going to defend your title? Because I ended up winning. And those are two very different kinds of pressure. One is the pressure of being the underdog, and the other one is the pressure of defending your title. And I had to get, you know, really in both ways, I had to let go of all those comments both years and keep coming back to what I felt was my authentic self so that I could do the best job I could.
Well, congratulations. I was about to ask you, did you win? So I'm glad you answered that one. So I guess the big learning then for you was to be your authentic self, and it worked.
You know, it worked and I won, but even if I hadn't won and I had come last, I would have still said that it worked, because when I said that I went in high involvement, low attachment, even if I had come last and I had felt like I had the best job I could, I still think it would have felt like a success. And what made that competition rare for me is that even though I've said that to a version of myself, that high involvement, low attachment, even though I've said versions of that to myself in other competitions for the last 30 years of my life in different sports, I'd never really felt it the same way. And, you know, that's part of the sort of the paradox of it is I think what helped me win was really not caring about winning.
Your advice, I guess, can be adopted by anyone listening to this in any scenario, I guess. You know, what worked for you is, as you just said, not really caring about winning, but just doing the best you could, being your authentic self, and, you know, being present. So for men who are listening to this, I mean, they're not going to go in and compete in the same way you did. But, you know, for men who are, you know, perhaps in midlife and they're in burnout or, you know, emotional shutdown or whatever, how do you think having proximity to animals, especially horses, how can that help, you know, in the kind of finding a way forward or healing process?
Yeah, you know, horses horses are very unique in the animal world and in the natural world. They are very much a herd animal and very much a flight animal. And because of the level of their brain development, they live very much in the present. You know, often with humans, we're living either in the future or the past. But to really interact with a horse on any kind of level, for it to feel good to the horse, to feel like a successful relationship, you really got to be right there with the horse. Um, you know, horses also have this incredible power to be very forgiving of our mistakes. You know, not every horse. Some horses are definitely more forgiving than others, but we can make a lot of mistakes with horses. And if we come back the next day and we're present and we try our best, they're usually going to show up for us again. Now, there is, you know, around the world, there's a lot of what we call therapy horses, whether it's for people that are struggling with something physically or something mentally or something emotionally. There's horses in these therapeutic riding programs or groundwork programs that are there to help us. And for the most part, the horses there can handle that really well. There's also an argument that I've heard that we shouldn't be using horses to help heal us. We should heal ourselves. Much the same way that you could make the argument that before we're in a relationship with other people, we should be whole ourselves and not relying on other people to make us whole. Um, you know, when it comes to horses, I don't totally buy that. I think horses do have an incredible ability to help us heal. Um, but I think just being aware of that argument can also uh, help us verbalize it, that we're not relying on them forever, that we are trying to heal and be whole so that we can help them. You know, there's a saying in the horse world that that humans train horses and horses train humans, which essentially means that there's moments where we're there to help horses, and there's moments where horses are there to help us, and it becomes sort of a give and take relationship, and we're not always there to just take from them. Um, horses also take, to do it on a higher level, they also take a certain amount of ability to read horses and a certain amount of skill. Uh, but there's also a level there for everybody. If you're Philip, if you're a person that's never been around horses in your entire life, and you can get into a situation where you can be safe, and there's a program that you trust, or there's more and more even men's retreats where people are using horses as part of that, and you can get into a safe situation. I think there's something there for everybody, whether you're a newcomer to horses or you're a very, very advanced horseman.
And do you think this kind of applies to any animal? Do you think there's a kind of healing quality to just having an animal in your life, especially if you're struggling?
I think so. I think even not animals, even just being around nature. I heard a phrase the other day which is called forest bathing. Have you heard that before?
I have,
You
yes,
know,
yeah,
you just
big
to
into
bathe.
Japan, I think.
Yeah, just to bathe in the concept of walking through a forest and just to be present, with trees around you, and I think it's the same thing with animals, and whether you're experiencing that on a very surface level and you're just taking a few minutes in your day to be around a dog or a cat or a horse or some nature, I think that's important. But I also think there's a huge amount of depth that we can go to with almost anything as well. I remember reading a book a few years ago about a lady whose passion was moss. That's it, moss. And she ended up studying moss her whole life, how it moves, how it migrates, how it grows, what it grows on. And you can take almost anything like that in nature, whether it's a simple barnacle or moss, and you can start to look on a deeper and deeper level at it and grow to have an appreciation for it.
Do you think we've become a bit disconnected with the natural world? I mean, it's easy to scroll on your iPhone for 12 hours a day, isn't it? Instead of going outside.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's unbelievable how easy it is to be disconnected from nature. And with my kids, they're 3 and 6. Uh, One of the things that makes me feel kind of the most uh, peaceful with them, or the happiest with them, is when we're all outside doing something together. And before I had kids, and even now at Christmas time, my kids are 3 and 6. It's so tempting to buy them stuff on Amazon or at the store, and you buy them, this toy or this car or this thing. And, they play with it and they get this sort of adrenaline rush of opening presents. But more often than not, after that sort of initial few minutes or few hours or few days has worn off, they're back playing with very simple things like in the mud, in a puddle, with sticks, trying to light a fire, exploring the woods, jumping off of rocks, climbing a tree. And it's those things that seem to bring the most peaceful, long lasting joy rather than the toys that are so tempting to get them.
That's a good message. So your book is called Starting in the Middle, and it's based on the competition that you've been talking about today. So how do you think that's impacted this? Let's call it the second half of your life, or your current life. How's it changed you as an individual, and what impacts do you see?
Deciding to do that, how I said, when I was, well, let me give you a little more backstory about it. So this competition has been around for since 2003, I think was the first year it ran. So over 20 years. And there's only 3 or 4 people that compete every year. And it's by invitation only. So not only do you have to be one of the best colt starters in the world to get invited, they also have to have heard of you, and you've got to have some connections, and you've got to be able to present in front of a crowd and on television. And there's a lot of, you're representing yourself, but you're also representing, the competition and the horse industry almost as a whole when you do this. And, I said that David O'Connor and my dad were initially, not, initially when I asked them if I should do it, they said no. And in the end, they both ended up coming. David actually ended up coming and was invited to be a judge one year, and my dad ended up coming to watch and was really supportive. But, that shift a little bit in career was something that I was really nervous about explaining to my clients, my family, and especially my wife. Was she going to think now that I want to do something different, with sort of different hours and different pay and a different lifestyle, that I'd somehow tricked her? Was she going to be supportive of me doing this, or was she going to tell me no? And I think a lot of times with people that have goals that are really out of the box, or they want to change their lifestyle in some way, it's the people that are closest to us, or the people that love us, that people that want to protect us, that stop us from doing it. And I was really lucky in that my wife supported me through this. And it's kind of given me this ability now, by going through something that was so life changing and required, to be in such a vulnerable position. It's given me sort of a confidence to maybe think, if I want to change again, if I want to write another book, if I want to change, this path a little bit, to sort of have the confidence to start again. Starting again is not an easy thing. But I think if you do it once and you're successful, either there's somebody around you that does it, or you can support somebody through it, I think it gives you a confidence to maybe do it a second time.
And how do you start again if you just don't know what you want to do? You know that what you're doing now is not it, but you don't know what actually is going to make you feel fulfilled. Where do you start there? And I guess you can only talk from your own experience, but I just wonder if you can relate that to other folks.
I mean, I think the first thing is just making a little space in your life in a small way, to start to have that honest conversation with yourself and the people that are closest to you, that you trust and respect. Without that space, whether it's maybe it's that space with nature or with animals, or maybe it's just space by yourself, or by a campfire, or by the ocean, or at a men's retreat. When my job every day is riding horses. And a lot of times I'll be with a horse, or riding a horse on a trail, and it gives me a little chance to think. And it's very easy to get in a job, or get in a situation with kids, or where you're feeling behind with the mortgage, or the budget, or whatever it is, to feel like you have that space in your life. And I think the first part is trying to have that space where you can hear yourself think. Maybe you can have those conversations. Maybe you can read books. But without that space, I think it's pretty difficult.
And just final question, then. You've talked a lot about this, during this conversation. But for guys that are, feeling overwhelmed and feeling, burnout and maybe disconnected, apart from the advice you've just given, what would you advise that they do from your experience?
I mean, my heart just if I think about myself, at those life-changing moments in my life, in my 20s when I left home, and then again a couple years ago when I started this journey to do Road to the Horse and take a different direction and write a book about it, and how scary and vulnerable it felt. If I could go back and give advice to myself, it would probably be that you don't have to have all the answers, and to not shy away from the feelings. That if there's fear or doubt or pain or adversity, to just feel that and be there with that, and let it tell you what it's going to tell you. What that lady that told me about that love is being present. I remember something else she said a few years ago. She was leading a group of people through sort of a group session, and one person described, basically the feelings of jealousy. She was saying, the other people have this and I don't have it, and I want it, and it's affecting my life in a negative way, and there's some resentment building, and it's creating an unhealthy thought pattern for me. And the therapist said, well, jealousy when seen through the lens of that's just your heart telling you something that you want. And if you can think of having something you want as a blessing, that gives you something to go and strive for, and to not get so bottled up in the resentment, but to really look at it honestly and think, is this something that I want, or is this something that is just fleeting and is sort of a brief glimpse of like wanting that Christmas present that I know is going to pass in a day or 2 days or a week. The unwrapping of presents and the glitter of it is fleeting, or is this something that I really want? And if it's something that I really want, that's a gift, to pursue that. And just like with Road to the Horse, then the next step is to really find a way to be high involvement, low attachment, which means that the gift of trying to get it is the process. And even if I don't win Road to the Horse, the amount that I learned about myself and about starting horses, that's the bigger gift, not the ribbon or the prize money. But and I still believe that now, even though I did win, I still believe that the amount of stuff I learned along the way would have been enough of a gift in itself.
Thank you, Tik. Thank you for your insights. Thanks for sharing your experience and that great advice. We'll put a link to your book, Starting in the Middle, as well in the notes. But yeah, just to say thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Philip. And anybody that's getting the book, try to support your local publisher in the United States. That's Trafalgar Square Books, and in the UK, it's Quiller Books. And if you're not feeling supportive of a small publisher, you can always get it on Amazon. And thank you all very much for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Midlife Men podcast with me, Philip Briscoe. Tik's book, Starting in the Middle, is available in the UK from Quiller Publishing and in the US from Trafalgar Books. Links will be included in the show notes, and you can also buy it from Amazon. To help raise the profile of the podcast, it really helps if you could leave a rating or review, and please do promote it to your networks. It all helps expand the reach of these stories. Finally, there's now a book called Men Speak Up, Journeys Through Mental Health, which is based on the podcast and available to buy on Amazon and through other online retailers.